Well, hello and welcome to the channel. I'm glad you could join me for this episode of our Valentine Mark VI Canadian build early production by MiniArt. Now this video is part 2. We'll be doing the upper hull, interior painting, and also some photo etch, so that ought to be a lot of fun. So the first thing we need to do is to remove our tracks, which we assembled in our last video. So I do get a couple of baggies here to put our tracks in. We don't want to mix up the parts from our left to the right side. That might be an issue when we go to put these back on. And the reason why we have these things separated like this is because we really want to paint and weather the tracks separately from the rest of the vehicle. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to get that look that we really want. It's really hard for me anyway to paint these tracks on the vehicle. So where we stopped in our last video was 16, and that was track assembly. And so we have steps 17, 18, 19, and then it goes on. Now the way MiniArt has this set up is they want you to fully build up the majority of the upper hull, and that means all these little bitty parts, the lights and the grab handles and everything more or less except for the very back portion of the hull, which you do after you join the upper hull to the lower hull, and that's not until step 32. But if we have an issue, which we already know that we did have a slight warpage issue with the upper hull, so we really don't want to be putting all these little bitty fragile parts on and then having a fit issue. So what we're going to do is take a look at this fit. Now there are two little rods that come up on our slack adjusters on the front lower hull, and you gotta kind of get them right through these little bitty holes. You see them right there. One to the left, one to the right. Now what we're looking at here is that there's not very much on the rear of the upper hull here as far as contact surface goes to try to attach this. And you can see these two little bitty tabs there and there. They're supposed to be center of that large cutout, and you can see here this plate is what's supposed to fit in there. So what we have is we have these interlocking fingers. So what I've decided to do is just to go ahead and build up the very rear portion of the upper hull here. That way we'll have a nice solid surface, I guess you can call it. And it'll pull everything together in the rear of the upper hull. That way everything will fit exactly like it should, except, I mean, in my theory anyway. So I do hope that this works out well, and I think it will. As you can see here, those fingers kind of overlap right where I'm putting the glue. So once we get that glued up, we're going to go ahead and put on the rear doors for the engine compartment here. Now you do have to sand a little bit on these to get them to fit properly, but they do fit nicely once you take care of those little clearance issues that it has. Now we're also going to go ahead and glue in the turret ring, and that'll add rigidity to the upper hull. Now there are no tabs for alignment here. They are just the beveled edge arrangement where the parts come together. But it fits really nice. So one of the problems that we have is this, I guess it's a transmission access door. If we want all this to help us align, there's no real tab to keep that from flopping back and forth. And I think it's going to be much better if we just go ahead and glue this all up as a single unit in the rear. Now I guess MiniArt probably did it this way in case there was a full interior and you could display it with these panels and doors open. So we just use a little bit of polystyrene to stiffen up those edges there, which that type of polystyrene tab wouldn't be there on the real vehicle, of course, in real metal. So we'll just put that together like that and make it nice and stiff in the rear. And that's going to help us with our alignment, I hope, when we go to put the upper hull and the lower hull together. So now we're going to go back in instructions, and this is step 17. This is the toolbox. And yeah, I do skip around. I'm not following the instructions exactly the way MiniArt wants us to, but I think maybe this is probably a better way to go about it. So one of the issues I have here is the fender on the right side is kind of still a little bit bowed up. So I'm going to use the toolbox as a way to help push that fender down. Now these fenders are very, very thin. MiniArt's done a great job in getting this polystyrene plastic down as close to scale as possible. So before we close up our upper and lower hulls, we got to finish up the driver's compartment. And that includes putting in these instrument panels here. So we have one on the left and one on the right. And we'll have to go ahead and glue those up. And then there's also a couple of pedals that are attached to the underside of the upper hull. And we will glue those up too. So I'm being very careful to make sure that I get the right angle on those. We don't want them to be out and pushing up against the front plate of the lower hull. And those panels, the instrument panels, also help center the upper hull. And as you can see in the rear here, we've got a really nice fit. Everything lines up exactly the way it's supposed to. So we do have a little bit of bow in the upper hull right there. You can see it kind of springy, but that's okay. We'll be able to clamp that down and just glue that together. So now we can go ahead and prepare for some painting. We need to paint the interior of the vehicle a little bit here. I want to display this model with all the hatches open. So what we're going to do is go ahead and mask off the contact areas where the upper and lower hull join together. That way we don't have to clean off any paint when we go to glue these two halves together. And here we're just masking off the lower hull as well. And you don't have to be real careful with it, just kind of get the tape on there and make sure that it sticks real good so that you don't have any overspray gets up underneath it. So I painted the portion of the hull behind the driver's compartment black, and I just used craft paint for this, mixed for my airbrush, and I'm just going to protect that for against overspray. I don't want to have to go back in and touch that up. So we're just going to put a little bit of a paper towel over top of it here, and that'll protect it. And we have the same issue with the upper hull. I did paint that black as well underneath the turret. Now I used Anita's acrylic craft paint for both these, the black and the white. And so the driver's compartment is painted white, and we just need to remove these pieces of paper towel that we put in place, and also the mask for outlining the driver's compartment area. And so now we're going to paint up a couple of things here in our driver's compartment. I'm using Panzer Gray from Vallejo and a little bit of airbrush thinner, just very, very little airbrush thinner. But I'm going to paint the grips on the laterals. Now the laterals is what the driver uses to steer the vehicle. And so we'll paint those up, and also the knob on the transmission shifter, and we're going to do the dial faces that are on our two little instrument panels here. Now you probably won't be able to see these instrument panels very well, if at all. So we're going to come in also with a little bit of Model Master leather. This is an acrylic paint, water-based. And we're going to paint the seat cushion for the driver's seat. So now we're going to do a little bit of sponge chipping in our driver's compartment. So this is a synthetic sponge, and I'm just using acrylic paints, so I'm not too worried about it. If you are using a enamel or thinner based paint, you're going to want to be sure that you check and test this, see whether or not it would dissolve with enamel thinners. So we're going back to Panzer Gray and a little bit of airbrush thinner here for our chipping color. Now I did get too much thinner in there, so I just kind of dried that out, or soak some of that up. Now we're going to mix it up really good, and we'll be ready to do some sponge chipping. So we want to take and load up our sponge with the paint, and then we're going to dab out, or unload the sponge as much as we possibly can. Now the whole idea here is very, very, very small chips. Large chips look really out of place, and sometimes I do get carried away and I get some large chips, but the whole idea is to make them really fine, small chips. You can never have a chip that's too small. See, those look pretty good. Sharp edges and corners are usually the things that get chipped up first in any vehicle, especially considering how hard these things are used. So that's where you want to kind of concentrate your chipping effects, and then also on a little bit on the flat surfaces on the floor of the vehicle, or also on the sides a little bit. Add a little bit of interest. So we are going to use this Testors enamel flat steel, one of my favorite colors of all time, and do a little bit of dry brushing. Just kind of catch some edges here in the driver's compartment. Put a little bit of shine here and there. So it's not a real shiny silver color. It gives it the impression of older looking metal. And I do use it over the instrument clusters as well, the instrument panels, just to kind of refine the bezels on the instruments, the dials and the switches and everything that's there. It doesn't look too bad. All right. So once I get that all painted up, we're going to go ahead and protect everything with this Model Master Acryl Flat Clear. Now it is in a water-based acrylic. We'll let that dry. Now we're going to use AK Interactive's streaking grime here. So what you normally have in a vehicle is going to be right around the corners and the edges of any of the equipment that's in the interior is where dirt and stuff is deposited, and then there's going to be areas where it's less deposited because that's where the crew's walking and shuffling and climbing in and out of the vehicle. So the AK Interactive streaking grime is an enamel based product, so we can use thinner, regular enamel thinner, to help blend and move these pigments around, which is what we're doing here. And we end up with this kind of look right here. It doesn't look too bad. I'm kind of happy with that. So now we can go ahead and prepare the upper and lower hull for assembly. We're going to go ahead and join these two together and get this glued up. So hopefully this is the last time we put it together. So, again, you've got those two little fragile rods that come straight up off the slack adjusters. You got to get those through the fenders and get everything lined up. And as you can see in there, there's not a whole lot that's visible, but we do have some character going on deep inside the vehicle, and that'll be nice. Final check. Make sure everything lines up good and kind of snap it into place here. And so I will use Tamiya Extra Thin and just glue our upper and lower hull together, and we'll set that aside and let that dry up nice and solid for us before we continue on with the build. So now we can start to concentrate on all the larger items, I should say, and start building up the upper hull here. So we're going to start off with the big parts that are the lowest down on the upper hull, and these are some doors that we have here on the side of the engine compartment, and we will build these up and install these. And like I say, I'm not really following the instructions, so you really need to mark these items off as you get them on there. That way you can spot items that you may have forgotten. And it seems to me that this is probably the better way to do this. And one of the things that we're going to leave for the very last will be all the little fragile grab handles. We don't want to be ripping and tearing those things off and breaking those before we get everything ready for them. So I do find that Tamiya's thicker model cement works well on large items or any areas where there are spaces that needs to be filled. And then for everything else, we just use the Tamiya Extra Thin, which I use for the majority of the work. And as you can see here, there are some really nice details in these upper hull parts. And some of them are quite fragile, so you do have to be careful with them. MiniArt is really, really good. They got quite the reputation for having real fine detail, and a lot of the parts are really thin, so you have to be careful when cutting them from your sprues and cleaning them up. So here we're just putting the, I guess they're vent covers, the armored covers here on the rear doors. And they do have a specific sequence that they go in, so you do need to pay attention to the instructions when you go to put these on. So I use the Tamiya thick cement to attach them, and then I come back in with the extra thin and just go over the edges. So that's one door down, one more to go. So now it's time for a little bit of photo etch. So it's kind of a love-hate relationship with photo etch. Now MiniArt has theirs. They've got the clear film on both the front and the back side of the photo etch. So with this type of photo etch, it's always better to remove it from the front side and then trim and cut the little attachment parts from the fret itself. Now I do the cutting on a piece of glass, which you see right there. So for these parts with a straight fold, I'm just going to use a couple of razor blades, one to hold down and one to slip up underneath the edge of it. And we can just get our 90-degree bend. So I've got like 3 more of these to make, and it looks pretty good. Anytime you can do your photo etch in one go, you're in good shape. So this guard here goes over top of the vehicle's horn, but it has a curved surface. So what I've chosen here is a drill bit that actually kind of matches the arc that we need. So I'm going to use that as a bending mandrel to kind of shape the curve so that we can keep it nice and consistent. And then we're just going to bend that around. Now you can use different size drill bits for different things, and I think that they work out really well for getting those curved surfaces. And that didn't look too bad. So we'll put a little bit of glue on that before we attach it to the vehicle. So I didn't anneal any of these photo etch parts because a lot of the etchings on them make the photo etch really thin. And as you can see here, this is our exhaust guard, and it has a really fine screen effect on it. You can see through it really good. If we were to anneal that and get it too hot, we stand the possibility or even the probability of those real fine brass filaments there just being burnt up. So you want to be careful about stuff like that. Now annealing would make it easier to bend, but I'm just going to stay on the cautious side and not screw these up, or try not to anyway. Now there is a exhaust guard that comes with the model. That's a polystyrene solid type. You can use that, as you see me just do there, to get our initial bend. And then I go back to the drill bits using their round shape to get the rest of the curvature that we need. So here we are, it's almost bent into the right position. A little bit more work and a little bit more time, we'll be ready to go with our heat shield. Now we won't attach the heat shield. We'll do that after painting so we can do the exhaust. Speaking of exhaust, there are 2 clamps that go around the muffler. So these are the most challenging parts. So I did the angle bends first. And here I'm using a drill bit and a rubber eraser. And we're just rolling over top of the center section of this piece of photo etch to get our curve, or to initiate the curve, I should say. And then I come back in with a drill bit that's about the same diameter as the muffler itself, and we'll get the final shape. That doesn't look too bad. Only one more to make. So when it comes to attaching photo etch, you can't use regular modeling cement. It just will not hold these metal parts. So we have to use CA glue here. Now this is medium strength CA glue, which means we can stick the part on there and you've got maybe 3 seconds to move it. then it's pretty much stuck. So kind of plan ahead. Make sure that you get your photo etch down where you want it. So now it's time to put on these handles. And as you can see here, I have left the sprue gates on nice and long. That gives me something to kind of hold on to. And after these handles set up, I can come back in with my sharp sprue cutters. And these are the Tamiya ones. And we can just nip off the sprue gates right off those handles. and it's so much easier to do it this way. And then we can come back in and just sand off and polish down any remaining evidence that these screw gates was ever there. And this way we don't have to worry about losing our small parts to the carpet monster or whatever other monster you have lurking in your model building area. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at everything that we managed to accomplish in this portion of the build. Hope you've enjoyed this video as much as I've enjoyed building the model. Special thanks to all my subscribers. I really appreciate you guys. It's because you guys come and watch that I keep making these videos. Now, if you are new to the channel and you're not a subscriber, but you like this kind of content, why not go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss the next episode in this build. And you can also go to the channel, Hillbilly Military Modeling, and check out other builds. There are several builds more to come, and you're not going to want to miss those either. And as always, I love hearing from you guys. Let me know how I'm doing, and if there are other things that you'd like to see on the channel, let me know that too. Now, I have been using craft paints quite a bit in my recent builds, and if you guys would like to see a video maybe on craft paints, let me know that too. I'd appreciate hearing whatever your thoughts are. So with that, that will wrap up this video, guys. I really appreciate you taking a look. Now, you guys stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.